was €500. A typical modern computer with a 500 gigabyte hard drive would have cost the same as a Boeing 747, more than €200 million. The computer took several quantum leaps forward in terms of size and cost reduction and an increase in capacity. A floppy disk of the first generation stored 400 kilobytes, the next generation already 1.44 megabytes. A 64 gigabyte USB stick we now wear around our necks like reading glasses would in 1984 have had the dimensions of the Millennium Tower. Today, everything is happening a bit too quickly. The last quarter of a century has become an age of fast answers without questions. A range of functions seem to have developed a life independent of computers and their peripherals. Mobile phones and organizers have become small, high-performance offshoots of big computers. The electronics of the first lunar module can't quite match what every washing machine can do 40 years later. For the novel of a dystopia that George Orwell wrote in 1949, he chose the title 1984. But the oft-quoted Orwell year 1984 is in fact the year computer technology for everyone took off.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the information purification for the first time in all history, with one resolve, one cause.
Apple armed itself with a bellicose video message for its first computer for the people. George Orwell's dark vision of a totalitarian state hasn't come true. Instead, computers started invading our homes in 1984.
Introduce Macintosh, and you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
It was also the birth of the first generation of computers from Microsoft. Bill Gates dominated the front covers and proudly presented his first storage medium, which looked like it was made of cardboard. These days, not even a snapshot taken by a mobile phone would fit on it, let alone an entire music video.
It's only a movie. It's not funny.
In Austria, the first private television broadcasters went on air and we learned a new word, zapping. But the box of electronics was stupid. Interaction was a skill that had to be learned.
We've been spared the vision of 1984 with Big Brother and his famous moustache who watches everything. But what we have done is create a surveillance state. Of course, behind a technologically very pretty facade, behind a kind of fun society, but nonetheless.
Spaßgesellschaft haben wir natürlich einen ganz beinharten Kontrollstaat geschaffen.
Computers everywhere, around the clock. Total networking and a high degree of surveillance. What are we doing with the computers and what are they doing with us? There are two famous examples of computers trying to be human. There is HAL from Stanley Kubrick's science fiction film 2001: A Space Odyssey. It wanted to seize power from its human masters. And the reality? In airline traffic, where human brainpower coupled with computer-controlled onboard electronics sometimes causes misunderstandings. But more about that later. On the other hand, Deep Blue presented the sporty, playful variety. Here, a chess computer competes against the world's best chess players. 256 computer chips against 10 billion human brain cells.
The moment I make mistake with this machine, the moment I make mistake, I will be out of the game. There is no mercy and there is no hope for the gracious gesture for the computer side. It will just go and kill you.
Kasparov, the human being, may be able to recall 50,000 moves from memory and eliminate all those that aren't suitable. Deep Blue, the computer, stubbornly goes through every option, even the absurd ones, all the way to the end. This addresses the central question of whether computers are intelligent. The answer is a clear maybe. Artificial intelligence, yes. It's a bit like comparing apples and oranges. Deep Blue was fed with data for 6 years to analyze 100 billion move sequences in 3 minutes.
These computers do a vast amount of work for us. They make things a lot easier. But at the same time, they require us to take care of them, look after them, nurture them, feed them codes, do software updates, that kind of thing.
Wir müssen sie immer wieder pflegen, indem wir ihnen neue
Computers are very time-consuming, and we don't notice that we could be spending this time doing socially important things.
Und wir übersehen dabei, dass uns natürlich diese Zeit
We're missing out on social development.
im Leben in der gesellschaftlichen Entwicklung fehlt.
On average, we spend half an hour a day on the digital administration of our everyday lives. We pick things up on the internet and play it somewhere else. 3 computers per user are normal. Of course, it embodies the all-in-one idea, one gadget that can do it all. But nobody knows whether we're yet ready for less hardware. Originally, computers were for geeks, but for most of us, they were a thing of the future. The singer and composer Christine Zerburg uses computers in her work.
My first encounter with computers wasn't composing, it was the typewriter. I typed up my lyrics and wrote stories, and then these typewriters came out where you had a crawler screen at the top where you could save the whole page.
Die hat dann oben so ein Lauffeld gehabt und hat dann irgendwie.
That was the absolutely greatest thing ever.
Das war der überdrüber Wahnsinn.
The development is moving from the electric to the electronic typewriter. In the future, the microchip will start to dominate the office too.
In parallel with the developments in the computer world, the typewriter fought for survival. It was given a memory, and its one-line display was soon moved to a small screen, but it was never really part of it. Atari and Commodore are legendary style icons, seen as the technological beginning of many developments in the communications industry. A textbook people's computer. The storage medium of this forerunner generation to the plug-and-play home computer was the very analog audio cassette. Atari started later with the floppy disk. Digital photography has brought about a revolution in memory capacity. In 1984, the entire contents of a computer could be transferred from one computer to another on a 1.44 megabyte floppy. Today, 250 gigabytes of memory is the lowest acceptable, and transfer speeds have become thousands of times faster because nobody is willing to wait for anything any longer than it takes to boil an egg. Computer performance can be compared to a city and its public transport network. The memory of a hard drive is represented by the buildings. They contain the data, or here, the people. The random access memory corresponds to the places where the people perform activities, the school or the workplace, for example. The modes of transport correspond to data packages that do the transfers. The clock signal corresponds to the speed of the working steps. The more megahertz, the faster the work. The circuit diagrams and displays for public traffic networks have a disconcerting similarity.
Eigentlich ist der Computer weder eine Rechenmaschine.
Computers are neither calculators nor typewriters. They're rather an extension to our privacy, to our most intimate thoughts and actions.
Unsere eigenen höchstpersönlichen Gedanken und Lebenswelt.
www. These 3 letters, or rather this letter typed 3 times, has shrunk the physical world and greatly expanded the computer world. At around the same time as digital photography arrived, the internet became available for all. Since 1993, we've been in the World Wide Web, downloading things onto our desktops. We download more often than we take trips to the fridge. As a result, the virtual world has become an economic reality. Almost everything is available online. The expression of the era is to Google, and the system behind it gives us a comparison in which Homo sapiens doesn't look so bad.
Das Gehirn mit seinen rund
The brain has around 100 billion nerve cells and 100 trillion synapses, and it works like a huge parallel computer. But the brain requires less than 100 watts.
weniger als 100 Watt braucht.
If you imagine all of Google's computers put together, the computing power is equivalent to that of 20 to 25 people.
Von etwa 20 bis 25 Menschen.
I don't use computers for computing. I use them for writing and for archiving.
The trained typesetter Heinz Rudolf Unger is an author who managed to make do without a computer for half his life.
I'm a very sloppy person, I have to admit, and that's why I introduced some oversized structures to create order.
Heinz Rudolf Unger anticipates the principle of how computers function in his workspace.
These workspaces are all individual building sites, but that's also because I work in many different literary media. These areas are very separate, but all of them require 100% attention. That's why I have different workspaces for different projects.
Daher gibt es verschiedene Arbeitsplätze für verschiedene Projekte.
Some thoughts aren't very compatible with computers.
Im Grunde schreibe ich mit allem, was mir
I write with everything I have available, and I have very different emotions with all of those. I have a detached emotion when I'm sitting in front of the screen following a text compared to when I'm scrolling down ideas in the middle of the night because I've just dreamed of them. Boy meets girl, for example. Of course, the writing itself reveals how captivated I was by an idea, and that's not there with computers.
Also, dass man da ergriffen von der Idee war. Und im Computer kommt es dann gar nicht.
This emotion is lost. The emotion then must come across through the words themselves. The truly revolutionary thing about computers was this new way of working so that you can constantly keep working on your documents.
War ja diese neue Art des Arbeitens, so dass man sein Textmaterial die gesamte
In the past,
Zeit
you had to laboriously blank it out between the 6th and 7th versions of a project.
zum Beispiel mühselige Klebeumbrüche machen müssen zwischen der 6. und der 7. Fassung.
But there is the danger that texts become too smooth, polished like a tombstone.
Dass Texte dann zu glatt werden, dass geschliffen wird wie
That's why it's a good idea to write by hand and do sketches and leave mistakes in and work around them.
Es ist sinnvoll, wenn man außerhalb des Computers auch mit der Hand schreibt, dass man Skizzen macht, dass man
Outside of the computer, I have a day planner where I write in every day.
außerhalb des Computers habe ich auch ein Tagesjournal.
The individual projects develop in the form of hieroglyphs.
Projekte kommen in Form von Hieroglyphen praktisch.
I don't write the whole title. I have an icon for every project.
Künstler brauchen
Artists
wahrscheinlich
need all of their senses to create something.
zustande zu bringen.
The computer and the internet have also taken hold of the visual arts. At the monothematic Computer Biennale of 1995, the sculpture by the media artist Richard Krischer was slowed down via the internet on its way through the Austrian pavilion at the Venice Biennale. Every user influenced the object in its pre-programmed motion sequence by logging into the internet address of TS4. The incoming data streams were shown on the monitor. The visual arts now make use of the new media, seemingly without transmission losses. Installations aren't set up, they take place. The music has been given a further keyboard with computers, which has developed from an experiment into a system.
Computer. Es war also ein vollkommener
It was a total play instinct. There are these sounds that acoustic instruments just don't have. Now we have the subject of computers. We got the first computer sounds. Computers make sounds. What kind of sounds are they?
Sounds, die ich mag.
The sounds I like are the paper sorter, for example.
Dann haben wir
Here we have a robot.
ein Robot. Es gibt Geräusche.
There are sounds that are music. A sound is music.
Ich muss sie immer bunt machen.
I always have to make it colourful. I don't like grey. I often think about which sound will get what colour. It has a lot to do with imagination for me.
Sie zu tun auch.
Do